Do you ever feel like a solitary creature living in a social world? We are building an online community that fosters virtual friendships. Hello, and welcome to Social Leopards. I'm Beth.
Hi, I'm Bea.
And we are here to collect and share stories and information in the hopes of finding positive and meaningful ways forward. It is our goal to navigate this jungle called life.
Who knows? Maybe a leopard can change its spots. Hello, Social Leopards. Welcome to episode 11. This is Bea.
Hi, I'm Beth.
Today we're going to discuss meaningful ways to spend time alone. We received a request to cover this topic for those of you who don't yet feel ready to pursue actively social lifestyles, but do want to work on themselves to get ready to take those steps. But before we dive in, we thought we would share a motivating story from a listener who has found success.
Yes, I'll read an email here from Macy D. And she wrote, I decided to stretch my social wings a bit, even though I was feeling uncomfortable about it. I have always wanted to go to this trivia night at a local bar. Bar scenes are not my thing, and I made sure to call my mom and let her know I was going there and to send someone to find me if I didn't text her by 9:30. I walked in and I saw another female sitting alone at the bar, looked to be about my age, and it took all the courage I could muster, but I went up to the bar and sat in the stool next to her. She had her eyes locked on her phone, but I ordered an appetizer and a drink and I waited. I realized I had to go get some papers and a pen from the trivia host, but all of a sudden the other girl stood up and asked me if I was here for the trivia game. I said yes, and she asked if I wanted her to bring back the game sheet. I nodded. When she returned, I asked her if she wanted to be on a team, and she smiled and said yes. We mostly concentrated on the game, but at the end of the night, we came in like 6th place. And she said that was the best she'd ever done and asked if I would come back next time and to be her teammate again. I am so excited this happened. It's too early to know if this becomes a friendship or not, but it really made me feel stronger as a person, you know? Anyway, thanks for the advice. Glad I took it.
How amazing that she was so brave and that she took our advice and it worked. I mean, I think, that says that you have to try everything that you hear. You have to give it a shot. See if it works. You've got nothing to lose. So bravery. We've got to be brave.
Good job, brave Macy.
Yes, good job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's get started with today's topic. Do you want to start us off, Beth?
Sure. So, being alone. There are lots of reasons that people are alone in this world. Sometimes being alone is a choice. But for those of us who listen to this podcast, it's usually accompanied by feelings of loneliness, right? So today we're going to talk about a few types of descriptions of people who are alone in this world before we dive in any deeper, just to kind of understand the bigger picture. So Bea, I'll have you start us off with a description of people who are shy.
So shy is a state of being afraid about being afraid. People who are shy receive less satisfaction from some of the same experiences that others find enjoyable. They tend to avoid potentially unpleasant situations in general and are less motivated and sometimes less creative than those individuals who are outgoing. Another characteristic is a tendency to become more physically aggressive than their outgoing counterparts. So I think we should talk a little bit about that. Do we know people in our environment?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind with that description is that I would have thought that shyness would be associated with anything besides aggression.
Like passivity, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, same.
And so it surprised me that the science and the research says that shy people can become physically aggressive.
But I think I can understand that if somebody gets in your space and you're not willing to, you're not ready to accept them. So I have a little anecdote.
Oh, okay.
So maybe a couple months ago, I was walking with a friend nearby, having a little walk, and there was a person standing there that looked like maybe he was a little bit lost, I don't know if he was or not. And so my friend decided to ask him if he needed help. And he responded aggressively to her. And she was very taken aback. And I think this is an example, like, we misread the situation and you have to be careful with people.
Oh, I can definitely, that's a great image in my mind.
Right.
And I've run into people like that as
Mhm.
well, where you think that you're going to encounter one personality type and then all of a sudden it changes on a dime.
Yes.
I made the mistake of saying something to someone in a subway car once in New York City. And
That's a
it
dangerous situation there in New York altogether.
did not go well. My daughter was with me and she was mortified because the person, I think I just said, "Hi, how are you today?" or something like that, very naively. And the person began to rail on me.
Ooh.
Like, "How do you think I am? I'm homeless. What, how dare you with your,
How scary.
nice clothes and your good shoes ask me a question like that?" And I was very taken aback and learned a very valuable life lesson that day about, just reading a situation before you just put yourself out there.
Exactly. We have to read those situations.
Yeah. So people who are shy are afraid of being afraid. So I think that's kind of the main takeaway there.
Mm-hmm.
So the second type of person is an avoidant person. So people described as avoidant have pretty much the same description as those who are shy, but they're not really anxious about or afraid of being afraid. Instead, they actively avoid any situation that may involve a scenario where they will be made to feel any sort of negative reaction to a social interaction. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Gotcha. Now, this is also the next type of person is a non-social person. People described as non-social, interestingly enough, are typically more creative and less likely to become aggressive physically. They still aren't motivated to go for what they want, although they also don't actively avoid unpleasant things. So
that's really interesting. So, but they're not aggressive.
Right.
So they're just going to disengage.
So that's the difference between if you're like really shy and afraid of being afraid, or if you're just non-social.
Yeah.
You're not really afraid of anything. And so you probably don't feel that sense of defensive-ness, maybe?
Because you naturally don't need that social interaction. So like, I don't know if we talked about it, but there were a couple of, maybe we haven't, maybe we have, the loneliness scale. We may have talked about that the first or second episode, that people have a different need for social interaction. I have like a couple of friends that are in this choir with us, and they will tell me that your need, B, for social interaction is higher than mine. And I'm happy planting my plants outside, which, I mean, if you look at that scale, which at some point we should revisit, and you actually take it, it's fascinating that people definitely have different needs for social interaction. So that's no judgment there, but it's a thing.
Right. And I think when you understand where people are coming from, it helps you relate to them a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of part of why I wanted to kind of dig a little deeper into this, because people are alone for many, many, many different reasons.
Right. But there is definitely a serotonin issue here. So the people that have more serotonin in their systems tend to feel better by themselves versus the ones who have less, who tend to need more social interaction. And there's all kinds of stuff in between. But there is definitely some hormonal issue that's associated with this, which is another fascinating little tidbit.
Right.
So there's another thing that we should talk about.
Okay.
People who are rejected by their peers. So these are people who choose to be non-social due to negative experiences in their past. They feel rejected rather than making a conscious choice to be alone. These people may suffer from psychological damage due to past trauma, including bullying or a challenging family history.
I think that a lot of people are in this category. It's not seeming to be alone by choice, but alone due to circumstances and perhaps a little bit anxiety or fear driven. Would you agree?
I completely agree. I mean, I feel like, so when you're in a situation at work, for example, and maybe you're not a person that interacts with various coworkers like weekly, and you've got another group that do. And there's the thing about like when you see people, it has to be like consistency, frequency. And so you don't see them very frequently or consistently, and they start perhaps talking to your other coworkers before they talk to you, not because they're trying to reject you, but because you're not there all the time. But that could be misconstrued as rejection to you because you've had a traumatic experience in the past. Would you agree with that?
I would. And then I'm thinking about a conversation I had a few months back with a friend that did have a really rough childhood and was the victim of bullying as an example. And there are triggers in her life based on the way that people talk about other people behind their backs. And I know that it's human nature, and a lot of people are, quote, gossipy or, quote, judgy. And, we talk about trying not to be judgy, and with good reason, because you don't know what the other person is going through or has gone through in the past.
But to be fair, Beth, we know that people, maybe we don't do this, but people are talking behind our backs.
Right.
And I mean, we have to accept that.
Right. And I think the key is to not let it impact your willingness to go forth and find the people that are not going to talk about you.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. You have to find your tribe.
You do.
Yes. Absolutely.
I like that. The tribe.
Yes. Very much. And so I think there's one more definition, isn't there?
Oh, that we want to talk about? Yeah. So there's another one about people who enjoy spending time alone.
Yes.
And these are people who embrace and choose solitude. They actually enjoy the time that they do spend alone. And they're also open-minded. And they have no struggle associated with their desire to be alone, which is really fascinating. There are moments when I like to be alone, but I always think I have FOMO all the time because I just am very hyper. So I'm like, what's going on that I've missed out? But, then I realize I have to organize my closet. I have to give stuff to Goodwill. I have to plant. There's stuff I have to do. And I'm kind of procrastinating, trying to get to avoid it. Right.
Yep. And you have organized alone time.
Exactly.
Like I do. Yeah. Not really just hanging out and chilling.
No. It's usually I'm watching some kind of show and doing something else, which I shouldn't be, but.
Gotcha. So let's see. How does this relate to our conversation today? Of course, I'm going right back to my personal favorite mantra is you can't judge a book by its cover. In order to understand a person's situation, you must understand how they got there.
Exactly, right?
And that's part of empathy and building understanding towards others. And there's a big difference between empathy, sympathy, and pity, too. And
I almost feel like we should talk about the difference between empathy and sympathy because I think people just really are confused with that. What is your perception of empathy versus sympathy?
I think that when I think about empathy, I'm trying to walk beside someone or walk in their shoes a little bit, but not in a way where I am forming any kind of opinion other than trying to understand where they're coming from. Whereas sympathy is more, I don't know if this is the word or the phrase exactly, but feeling sorry for comes to me with sympathy is it is that the person is experiencing pain.
Yes.
And you might try to use some sort of mechanism or method by which to try to make them feel better instead of just allowing them to be in a moment, maybe.
Yes, I think so. I think sometimes people get upset when you're saying, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And they're like, oh, everything's fine. Versus being empathetic and be like, okay, gosh, that's got to be really difficult. Like, how do you feel about that? Or like, I'll be here to listen listen, tell me how that feels. And I think perhaps that's sometimes a better thing to do than to say, oh, I'm so sorry for you.
Right. And when you're sad, I mean, the most extreme is grief and loss, right?
Right.
And it's always awkward for me because when you're out on Facebook or
Right.
one of those social media sites where you say, using the example, my mom died because she did, and I announced it on Facebook, on her page, because her friends were very concerned about her, knew that she was in end of life, and I had to kind of let them know that,
Right.
it had happened. And then you're forced to see, 200, 300 times in a row, I'm so sorry for your loss. And it's hard to come up with anything else
It
to
is.
say.
It is.
And people are, it's a heartfelt thing.
It is.
And it's not inappropriate.
No, but we don't really know. What else do you say? Do you say like, gosh, she's in a better place? I mean, what do you say?
But that is an attempt at sympathy more so than empathy, I think.
But on Facebook, like if you're not there in person, that's probably the best you can do.
Right.
Like I think if you were at the person's funeral, you can think about something more heartfelt and genuine to say besides, I'm so sorry for your loss.
Yeah. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with saying that
Right.
at all. And it is, the most common way to acknowledge grief and loss. So no judgment there either that's your go-to. It's not helpful. It's just showing sympathy.
Yes.
For someone's situation.
Well, at least someone's there saying, I'm here with you in a way, so that's
right.
You're saying, I'm so sorry for your loss, but at least someone's like commented and saying like, but I'm here for you. I acknowledge the fact that you're struggling, that this happened, and respect the fact that, you're in mourning.
Right. And I know I went to that extreme example, but that was the only one that could come to mind with sympathy.
No, that was a great example because I think that is a tough situation. And the worst thing too, like for me, is when you have a coworker who's lost a significant other and you don't really know that person. Mm-hmm. And then there's the wake. And then I struggle. Should I go? Shouldn't I go? I feel like I should. Then I go and I'm feeling so awkward because I don't know any of these people, but I feel like I should be there just support the coworker. So yeah. So what else? So most people, even shy or avoidant people, would like to feel understood, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to feel like they could be perceived as, relatable, as an example. So a shy person may want to be more social, but their fight or flight reflexes are a lot stronger than someone who simply enjoys being alone. So people who have been rejected by their fears, like they're motivated in an even more different way, perhaps because of self-protection from future bullying or ridicule. So yeah, I mean, it's hard because like if you've been rejected or you're afraid of people or, you have that, we talked about that before, negative perception, you're going to definitely be like more kind of really self-protective, and like one negative thing is going to like probably definitely like convince you to not try again.
Yes. And I think a lot of shy people who are shy, if we do the person-centered way, do express a desire to be more social or interact more often, but they get wrapped up in their fear. Whereas a non-social person may not feel that compulsion or they don't feel compelled to be social.
Right.
Or at least not as strongly, because it's almost a more of a closer to a choice than a result of being shy.
You know what else we just didn't think about, which just you made me think about this. So shy and being like non-social. A lot of people that come across that way that are shy, people think that they are arrogant.
Really?
Because they're not talking to someone. So unless you get to know the person, like we talked about the judging thing, right? Back to that. You assume, or I would assume, that one does not want to talk to me, or they hate me, or like they think they're better, but they could just be shy. And I've had that many times. I've seen that with people I've met that I've given them the extra chance and realized, oh my God, the person's super shy, or they're not that social, So that's another thing. We have to make sure that we assess the person correctly and not judge.
Right. Perception,
yep,
is a huge thing. And it is so easy to decide based on initial interaction with people.
Right. If someone doesn't talk to you right away or say hello, like you'd be like, oh my God, bitch, whatever. You're assuming that they're ignoring you, but that could be like, A, they didn't hear you, B, they're uncomfortable, C, like, who knows?
Right. Exactly. We cannot know why people act the way that they do at first glance.
Exactly.
It takes a deeper dive.
It does.
And some time and sometimes some patience.
Right.
But if we maintain an open mind
Mhm.
and we practice my favorite word, compassion,
Mhm.
for one another every day, I think that really opens the door to friendships and relationship building and empathy.
And empathy, yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yep.
So we encourage all of you with a lot of alone time on your hands to think through the ways that you can make most of your alone time. No matter which of these categories you think you may fall into, there is an opportunity for self-reflection and a decision to work on the things that you desire in this life, right? We have talked to so many people, countless people, over the past years, and some of the common ways to spend time alone, we have kind of put in a little bit of a list here tonight.
Mhm.
And so what we are kind of calling it are our top 10 meaningful ways to spend time alone. No matter what kind of alone person you may be, I think all of them are helpful. So I'll start us off with number 1.
Okay.
Read a book. For it to be a meaningful alone exercise, I think we're suggesting a classic or a book with some substance,
Mhm.
perhaps nonfiction. I recently finished Blink by Max Gladwell. Would highly recommend.
I read that one. It's a great book, yeah.
Yes, fascinating book about trusting your gut.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really a self-help book. It's just observations about people who do as opposed to people who don't and the science behind that. And it was really, really cool. And it is also something that you can choose as opposed to something that is dark and might make the feelings of aloneness feel more alone or scary or darker, like a serial killer novel or something like that. Another really good book I read just while I'm thinking about books that I've read that I've really, really liked is Remarkably Bright Creatures. That one's by Shelby Van Pelt, and it is a story about an octopus. And I'm not going to spoil it, but it was a very unexpected and a very enjoyable read. I was very uplifted after reading the book. And so those are the types of books that I would highly recommend because they're more enriching.
Yeah, I agree with that. Those are great suggestions. Thanks for remembering that. So tip number 2 for meaningful ways to spend time alone is exercise. So Beth knows that I'm a tennis fanatic.
Absolutely.
And I play tennis, mixed doubles on Sundays, and I try to play twice during the week, and I absolutely love it. I mean, when I play tennis, I forget about everything. I just focus on that next shot. And it's really, very, very relaxing. So yes, I highly recommend exercise.
And I would have to say walking, because if I tried to play tennis, I think I would feel, well, number one, frustrated because I'm a terrible tennis player, but I would be stressed out and exhausted because I just don't have the kind of energy you do. But walking is probably my favorite. And then I always am seeing on the internet and on my phone the lazy person exercise app. I don't know what it is called. I'm sure everybody has seen it if they've seen any kind of ads at all. They're all over the place, but where you do wall Pilates.
Oh, I've seen that. I don't think that's lazy. I think it's hard.
I know.
I actually downloaded that thinking it was really hard.
Yes, but I think the point was it was exercise that you could do without any equipment.
Correct.
And you could do in the comfort of your own home.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's another just idea for exercise for people who don't want to go to the gym or they're uncomfortable going to the gym.
Absolutely.
And you can also modify those towards your own physical exertion that you're comfortable exerting.
Yeah. There's also pickleball if you don't like tennis.
Yes, I do like pickleball.
See?
I do. I
forgot about that. I thought you played. I mean, I've only done it once, but I thought you told me you've played it a few times.
I have played it. I belonged to a league for a little while. Yes, the broken ankle kind of took care of that for me, but I did love it, and I do intend to go back to it at some point.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm. So tip number 3 is meditate or do mindfulness exercises as opposed to physical exercise.
I love being at the beach. I mean, that's my favorite place. So I will envision myself on a beach with my friends in these very, very comfortable lounge chairs. And then I think, oh my gosh, I have to take a little nap because we're going to have a great party in a few hours. So I have to rest up for the party. And most of the time that gets me to sleep.
Really?
Yes, because I love going to parties.
I love that.
So.
That's a good one. I know when I have trouble going to sleep, if my mind won't calm down, and I may have shared this one with you before, I don't know, but I listen to the sound of my own breathing and I count my breaths. So, one breath in, one breath out is 1, and then the next time it's 2. And then I'll find myself becoming distracted. And instead of getting frustrated with myself, I just start back at 1. Sometimes I only get to 3 or 4, and then I have to start back at 1 because I've realized my mind has started to wander. But then as I continue to go back to 1, it will calm me down a lot faster than just letting my mind continue to do whatever it's doing that's preventing me from falling asleep.
I like that. That's great.
Oh, which speaking of, what's tip number 4?
Getting enough sleep.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, after age 50, my goodness, how difficult it is to get good sleep. It's so hard.
It is.
With all the hormonal changes that we have. Yeah.
Yes. And I mean, for anybody who does have that situation where their mind starts to kind of take on a life of its own as you're trying to relax, getting enough sleep, you might have to start a little bit earlier in order to relax and calm down. And I have, it used to be reading a little bit before bed or listening to some, I really love the Calm app.
Yes.
That kind of thing.
Or maybe having a very dark environment and making sure you have those curtains that are just the ones that don't let the light in, the light blocking ones, shutting the TV off. Not if your husband snores, putting tape over his mouth. Just kidding.
You know what I love in the wintertime? A weighted blanket.
Yes. Those are good.
I feel like I'm all cocooned. And that's very cozy.
It is cozy.
Yes. And my bedroom is always cold in the winter because it's an addition. And so I don't know, it just doesn't get the right.
Well, we try to keep ours cold too because, it makes a difference.
Yeah. And it's supposed to be good to.
It is. People say, yes.
Yeah. Sleep in a cooler room.
Yes.
Helps you for some reason. And I wonder sometimes if that's because then you will keep the blanket on and it helps.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Cuddle and cozy you up. Right.
Yeah. So what is tip number 5?
Tip number 5 for meaningful ways to spend time alone is to practice positivity. So this can include things like my favorites. Boy, I'm sharing a lot of favorites tonight. I got a lot of favorites in this life. Affirmations. And another thing, and I know that this is another repeat, is keeping a gratitude journal. So, affirmations, if you aren't familiar with those, are all over the internet. I don't have to quote or leave anything in the show notes because all you got to do is Google search it and you will find more affirmations than you will ever be able to read. But you pick those that resonate with you and you use them to send yourself and to send your brain positive messaging that over time can help you alter your perception of yourself if you let it. And always being positive instead of brooding in negativity is a good strategy for keeping yourself out of those darker places.
Yep.
So focusing on the positive is never a bad thing.
So tip number 6 for meaningful ways to spend time alone, focus on the future. When we spend too much time living in regret, we can stay stuck in places that keep us rooted in negativity. And I think that's very true. I think all of us struggle with that. But, how do you get out of there? Do you have any ideas?
Well, I think it kind of ties to tip number 5, practice positivity. When we focus on the future, then we're setting goals for ourselves and aspirations and following our dreams. Any of those things are good ways to focus on the future, or even just to concentrate on the things we're not going to do that have been holding us back. I think are good strategies to strive for in order to make sure that we are projecting ourselves as the person that we're wanting to be, and to find our authentic self as we, want to find happiness. And
I love that. The authentic self thing is huge. Like being able to just be yourself regardless.
Right.
And not like bending to other people's wills because you feel like, you want to be accepted, like just to be yourself.
Right. And I think that is, focusing on that future where you're just comfortable. I think that's comfortable in your own skin. I think that's a really great thing to focus on.
I agree.
So tip number 7, set realistic goals for yourself. So that, again, it's like a little bit of a snowball of tips that all relate to one another. We need to make sure that when we set goals, that it allows us to stretch a little bit beyond our comfort zone. And each goal can represent growth or progression, even if it's just a teeny tiny little micro progression with regard to how you are viewing and pursuing life. So achievable goal setting, even if it feels like a teeny tiny little baby step, is going to help your outlook. And in the overall scheme of things, it's going to help you see that you can take steps forward. So an important one to keep in mind.
Yeah, I like that one. So number 8 is celebrate the things that make you unique and special. We all have talents or skills, like you have an amazing voice and piano skill. I heard that. That we value above all others, and take on the task of acknowledging and rewarding what others may not know or recognize in you. And write these things down because these represent your strengths. So that's a very good one. Like I think about every day, like what strengths do I have? Because I struggle. So I think as we get older, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't do anything. I have like low energy. And I think, wait, what are the great things that I can do today? Oh, I can cook an exciting meal. I'm just kidding. So sometimes I can, I can still ski. I'm a good tennis player. I'm a good listener. So yeah, I think it's a great idea to think about what's unique and special about me, and trying to think what that is.
Well, you're also a good singer because we are in a choir together.
We are.
Community choir.
That's so sweet of you to say that.
We really both kind of value that for both fun as a hobby and, kind of name it among our skill set.
Yes. And also now that we're podcasters, that is unique and special about us because we're both podcasters. So, hey.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. So writing down your strengths, I think you said, and I think that's another way to kind of fortify the things that are special and unique about you and make you the person that other people might find interesting. So,
yes.
Yep.
And also developing new hobbies and skill sets as we age.
And we just talked about, really super briefly, authentic self. Well, what makes you authentic is also what makes you unique and special.
Absolutely.
And you should embrace that, even if it's a little quirky.
Oh.
So tip number 9 is try new things. This can be a hobby or any activity that's preferably a social activity, like taking a class or learning a craft or joining a club, maybe a book club, since we've been talking about books earlier on. Trying anything that brings you one step closer to living a more satisfied lifestyle. If you have a goal to be more social, then you should try something that is in that group setting. If in-person group settings are too intimidating at first, the baby step would be to take the class online first and then save that in-person activity for another goal down the line.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
And just to get comfortable interacting with others, I think is another try new things for people who really struggle with socializing.
And that's why we have the internet and the social media. That's a great use for that, actually. I think like eventually you should do things in person, but in the beginning, if you have the chance, going online is a great option. I agree.
Absolutely. And then finally, tip number 10, what do you got?
Be your own best coach.
Woohoo!
Research positive imagery maybe and body language and use those tools in your kit to fake it until you make it. And I feel like, if you give somebody else advice, it's always easier. So I feel like you have to think about what would you tell somebody else and then turn around and do that for yourself. Because I think it's hard to be your own best coach. You almost have to take yourself out of the situation. So like almost, okay, so if I was going to tell Beth what to do, about changing something, it's easier than for me to tell myself. But if I could think about what would I tell Beth, and then I could tell myself.
Oh, so yeah. So you're pretending like you're not your own best coach by like creating a mirror image of yourself and giving that advice to yourself.
Exactly.
What do you call that? Like third hand or what?
Second hand. I don't know.
So those are our top 10 meaningful tips to spend time alone. And I hope that you are able to apply a few of those things to your life.
So these are exercises in building good habits to avoid the pitfalls of loneliness, which we're going to discuss in a future episode.
Oh, yes. I forgot we have been talking about that, haven't we?
We have been, yes.
Ooh. So stay tuned, everybody.
Yep.
So before we move on, I would like to share that I have been on a hunt for inspirational quotes. And I would like to share one in particular, and I will ask you to be thinking hard about, because I know you've also been a quotey girl lately. So I'm going to share this one in particular that stuck with me, and it's been lingering in my thoughts and in my heart for the past week or so. So unfortunately, it's an author unknown quote because I looked it up and I can't get it to be attributed to anyone in particular.
Wow, so it's yours.
I wish. Like a phoenix rising from the ashes, we can rebuild ourselves from adversity.
I like that one. So it's really nice.
Yes. And it kind of resonates back to everything that we've said, that it doesn't matter what you've been through. You can always start anew. That's kind of how that speaks to me. And I've been thinking about that a lot lately, about rebuilding from where we were to where we can be in the future. Because we could all grow, even if we don't have a lot of things that we're working on that are super serious, even if our issues are mild in comparison to some people that we know. We always have opportunities to grow and learn and rebuild or build upon.
Yes.
And so, I don't know, it just speaks to me on all sorts of levels. Can you think of anything that has motivated you thus lately?
So here's another one from Joseph Campbell, writer and professor of literature.
Ooh, you are ready for me.
We must be willing to let go of the life we planned, to have the life that is waiting for us.
Wow.
But that's a tough thing to do. I completely agree with that. Because, like we think about this when I was growing up, like I had my entire life planned out, or I thought I did. And then it didn't actually go the way I planned it. And it was hard to readjust. And I feel like that's the same thing, like for every step of your life, you're going to always be readjusting because it never actually goes the way you planned it. And if it does, it's probably really boring. So,
but that's another good future episode fodder. There is, when people get stuck.
Yes.
And I've talked to so many people who are stuck in a rut. I'll never do this because it's always been this way. And they can't see any time anymore when they were feeling more positive about life. And they're just kind of like in that place where all they can see is the negative. So,
when I think about this, I think you probably do the same thing, sometimes analyze where I am in my life, in the stage of my life, and think about when I'm down, when was I happier? And what were the circumstances of that happiness? And I think, again, without our spoiler alert, I think we do have to do an episode, but there's so much we can talk about with that.
Absolutely.
But it's very difficult. You have to let go of that dream. To make room for a new one, maybe a better one.
Or a different version of the dream.
Correct, but you have to. And I think if you don't, I feel like there could be, and maybe there's research behind this, that you could really, in the future, give yourself or just perpetuate some kind of significant mental health issues if you're stuck, because you're then, releasing that serotonin, which is bad for us. It's almost as bad as drinking, honestly, and stressing yourself out so that you're damaging parts of your brain slowly. And I just think you have to figure out a way to get unstuck.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That is food for thought. For
Definitely.
Sure. Yep. So are we ready for sharing moment of the week?
Yes.
We are. Okay. How would you describe yourself in the context of feeling lonely or isolated? We've talked about a lot of definitions here today at the top of the episode, and maybe you even describe yourself as none of the above. In any event, we're interested in your thoughts. Feel free to comment below, visit our website, socialleopards.com, and leave us a message there, or you can email us directly at share@socialleopards.com. And if you're listening from your preferred podcast app today, please follow us, as this helps the algorithm find our podcast and share it with others who haven't found us yet. It doesn't cost you anything, but it does help us afford the cost of producing this show. So we are so grateful to each listener willing to take this step. Thank you so much for listening today.
Bye. Have a great week.
Take care.
This podcast sometimes discusses the struggles of loneliness, isolation, and depression in a way that can be triggering. Our content is not intended to provide or replace professional counseling. If life starts to feel too hard to bear, please seek help. In the United States, dial 988 if you feel as if you may harm yourself or others. Help is a phone call away. If you can't afford or find therapy, dial 211 for no or low-cost resources that may be available near you.